Catholic speaker if you're looking for him, because there's like a photographer, a number of other people.
Hockey player.
Hockey
It's like the
player.
most common first name with the most common name in Germany. So, thank you, Mom and Dad.
And I had to add my last name so people could actually find me, because my last name, my first name is difficult to type.
Yeah, but you actually got Timmerie.com.
Be jealous.
I am so jealous because ChrisMueller.com is a photographer from Venice, and he loves everything except the Catholic Church.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's just a nice guy. Great, really talented. Super
Venice
talented.
Beach. I'm not that surprised.
Yeah. Anyway, we've reached out.
Venice, some fun memories there, and a lot of the pro-life activism that I used to do. We would go out to Venice and have a fetal model display of all the signs.
Yeah.
And get out there talking to people who really disagree with you, but part of the idea was to be there with young people, teaching them to be a voice for life in the midst of challenging circumstances.
I once stepped on a hypodermic needle on Venice Beach, which was horrifying, by the way. But I stepped on the back of it.
That is horrifying.
That was horrifying. Yeah, I could have literally gotten hepatitis or AIDS or HIV. I mean, yeah, so I haven't been back in a while to the Venice Beach.
I can throw in a crazy story there. One of the vendors or shop owners on the streets was so mad that we were out there on a public sidewalk. You know, you have every right to be out on a public sidewalk doing pro-life demonstrations. They were upset, and so this owner or one of the shops happened to have a beehive only on Venice Beach. They then put the beehive and threw it into where we were standing, hoping the bees would attack us. Like, these people are crazy down
Wow.
on Venice Beach.
Yeah.
They get really angry, but it's a great way to train young people to be in really uncomfortable circumstances and speak the truth and stand up for life in circumstances that can be really hard. I mean, if you can talk to a stranger who's yelling at you and really disagrees with you or might have kind of crazy ideas, population control, whatever that might be, it helps you to be prepared when you're having a conversation with a friend that might disagree on the topic. So it's one area you can work. On social media, you can find me as well. I love the Instagram, in Chris's words. The Instagram.
Not such a fan.
The Instagram. Yeah, he's not a big fan, but I am primarily there. We were talking in the last show. It actually is a show that you will see later this summer. Coming up later in the summer when Chris is traveling as well for speaking, we have some shows that we've been building up in the arsenal, and one of them is on health and fitness. And something that we didn't mention that I wanted to, and I'll throw it out there while we're just chatting, is sometimes we get distracted by social media, or we just get distracted by certain websites that we like to browse. Might even be YouTube. I don't know. Whatever. Pick your poison. What might distract you? One of the things that's really helpful is having a filtration software that blocks out certain websites. I know I used to always block Facebook so that I couldn't be on Facebook for more than 10 minutes each day, and that was really helpful in making sure I'm not wasting my life away.
I have a newsfeed eradicator on my Chrome.
What is that?
So on you can get a Chrome add-on so that Facebook, you can't see the newsfeed. So when I go on to Facebook, I can post stuff, but I can't see the newsfeed on my Facebook.
That is very smart.
Yeah, so that just kind of does that thing. And then, content blockers. I've got Covenant Eyes on everything, all of my devices, all my kids' devices. And I actually went and I did, because Instagram's one of those things where it just is a time-sucking waste for me. So I blocked it on it. Pinterest, I blocked for me too, because I'll be designing my backyard or my dream home. I've kind of decided that my lottery home is going to look like Iron Man's. Just saying. If that ever happens.
Iron Man's house or the Avengers headquarters?
Okay, so more the Avengers headquarters in upstate New York.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
a massive compound or anything.
It actually looks a lot like Mercedes of Temecula. That's what we kind of decided. Yeah, so there you go. So, all right. Well, we're posting all the social media links right now to get everybody. So if you are watching, go ahead and share that. That would be great. We would appreciate it, as they would say in England, which we'll be talking about England a little bit today. So that's fun. Or the UK, as they say in the UK. Because most Americans don't know this. This is random conversation now. The UK is England, Wales, all those things. We say England as if it's the whole island, but it's not. It's not the whole island. You didn't know that. Maybe you did. I don't know. So we did a health fitness show, which I'm pretty excited about. Just talking about the different things that you can do and how that affects your spiritual reality and all of that good stuff. So that will be coming up this summer. Because I will be traveling a lot. Timmerie mentioned that. I work with the Steubenville conferences, so I'll be speaking at Steubenville conferences across the United States. I host those, and then I'm also a speaker at one of them. And then I'm also going, and I'll be at Catholic Family Land in Ohio, I think 6 times, doing young adults and high school talks there as well. If you haven't checked out either of those things, check out Franciscan Youth Conferences or check out Catholic Family Land if you're looking for something like a camp to go to with your family there in the middle of America. Are we good?
Do you have to have children?
I don't know. I typically go for the family fests, but I know they do other things as well.
Are they week-long camps? Or
it's a week-long camp, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I fly in Monday and out Tuesday, but yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, there you go.
I think we are starting or ready to get started here. I'm just going to set that up. Okay. We're set.
You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie. National speaker Timmerie Millington has been a passionate advocate for life as long as she can remember, helping Gen X through Z answer the call to true feminism and authentic manhood. Chris Mueller is a national speaker, author, father of 6, and is currently making a Catholic TV show for families as he travels speaking to over 10,000 people each year. Between Chris having over 18 years experience in Catholic lay ministry and Timmerie's holding a master's degree in biblical theology, together they cover the week's hottest stories from a Catholic worldview. You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie.
I am absolutely positive, Chris, that you woke up at 3 a.m. on Saturday to watch the royal wedding.
Didn't we beat them in a war a while back? I'm just saying.
Why would they dictate our lives in the middle of the night?
I was not very interested in the royal wedding, I'll be honest. As a student of colonial American history, no. Anyway, yeah.
I'll pass.
Yeah,
so
hard
funny.
pass. It is interesting, and it is spectacle. And so here's the point. It's awesome that we are all gathered to celebrate marriage. Hallelujah. We should celebrate marriage. We should stand up for that. I love it. That's great. The entire world focused on marriage for a day. Great. That's my takeaway.
That was a big fat period at the end. You know, I will throw this out there more on a fun note. I love seeing all the different hats from the royal wedding. So for anyone who's on my Twitter, at Timmerie, I would love to see what your favorite hat from the royal wedding was. I spent some time reviewing the hats and checking them out. There's some fun ones out there. I just saw one picture of a woman, and the caption was, "Someone's house is missing their insulation," because it looked like she had a big piece of like pink insulation on her head. Man, there was one that looked like a cut off meringue that just was like melting on her head. I mean, there were some really pretty ones, very elegant. George Clooney's wife, what's her name? Amal Clooney. She hands down best hat and best overall outfit. She was gorgeous. Loved her outfit. It is interesting that royal weddings are essentially the equivalent of the Kentucky Derby in that for the hat world. I mean, I guess if you are a haberdasher, you are super excited about either one of those. They do wear hats there, don't they? They do. Yeah. I think that I need to go. Yeah, well, I don't. I really want to wear a hat. So maybe someone can get married and have a British wedding where I can wear one of these fancy, awesome hats. But I did go to a tea party this weekend, and hats were optional. But I did not wear a hat because all I had was big, floppy hats for the beach. Tea party. I drink coffee like an American. Oh, come on. You probably have a little bit of inner Brit in there. No, not really, no. Zero. Nah, I like to do a silly British accent to wake my kids up sometime, but that's about as far as it goes. Well, you know what's funny is that there's this big reveal. Everyone's looking forward to what that wedding dress will look like on Meghan Markle, and everyone's waiting. There was some conversation that it was going to be really risque since she was already kind of pushing the limit, divorcee, kind of different background, but she had two very elegant dresses, very modish dress for the nuptials, right, and then a separate dress. Who has two dresses? She had a second dress for the reception as well. Right. No, she looked lovely. I mean, it was a surprisingly modest dress. That the focus of the outfit really was her face, and she was beaming in the picture. She looked lovely. But I thought, what a nice change to not say that this. Okay, it's gonna be out there. We don't need to see the wedding lingerie at the wedding. That is very true. We don't. I mean, this is, and so to have the focus of the outfit be her face.
that her husband is looking at her face, her eyes, her, there's no sort of like leering crowd. That's wonderful.
Staring at her. Well, and here's the thing: the dress was beautiful. Everyone's commenting, and I've got to say, I looked at her dress. It was beautiful. It was super baggy. I'm wondering if she, and again, in her business, maybe lost a lot of weight leading right up to the wedding. But both of her dresses were a little on the baggy side, and it's like she missed one of those fittings. Gorgeous dress, but a little loose.
Yeah, I wasn't super involved in that, but hey, I am a dad of daughters. If we're trending baggy, bring it on.
That is true.
Bring it on. I'm ready.
Beautiful dresses, though.
Yeah.
I still think Kate Middleton was one of my favorites. You have a picture up there right now, and her dress will forever be in. But Meghan Markle, I think the big thing with her was her veil was gorgeous. Everyone loved the super long, elegant veil that she had.
And I have not donned many a veil, but I just wonder, like, does that pull on your neck? I just would be so afraid that someone's going to step on that thing. And I'd be like, just,
Well, I mean, she does have a trail of little boys behind her carrying that veil along, if you look at any of the pictures.
Right. Yeah.
Well, lots of fun stuff with the royal wedding. Maybe you stayed up late to watch it. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you caught it on YouTube. You were a smart person. You could look at it later on. But I think it's pretty neat to see how people turn and are celebrating marriage. They are also still looking, I would say, Chris, at the fantasy of it, and looking that it is something that people can do while this is a royal wedding, fantasy style, royal style. I think that when we have these examples, even if, not saying that it's great to be divorced and remarried, we definitely don't want to celebrate that necessarily. But, that desire still on so many people's hearts, especially women, to marry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is very revelatory when we see a royal wedding and everyone is caught up in the romance of it, right? And the story of it, and how these two people found each other, and beyond he's royalty and he's this and that, and she's an actress, and at the heart of it, it's two people who fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that is such the human story, right? Like that's we all came, hopefully most of us, for the most part, we came from that story. Two people fell in love. Right. And I want, I just think we as a culture should be celebrating and cherishing and supporting that more and more and more. And I know that we've got this society that's embraced divorce, and that we know that marriages end, and that there's a lot of struggle in making a marriage work. But we know that this story is part of a human experience, right? Let's support that story. Let's get behind marriage and say, what can we do as a culture, as a society, to say that this is important? It's written into our fabric as human beings. How can we support that?
Speaking of fabric, there's a trend of plunging necklines, little fabric. There was a lot of conversation. I heard a piece on NPR talking about how the necklines are plunging very consistently. And, why is this trend? People say that J-Lo back in 2000 set the trend for this plunging neckline at the Grammys. It's one of the most actually Googled dresses, apparently. It's a Versace gown that goes all the way down to her navel practically. And a lot of brides today are choosing this.
Yeah, I think it's broader than just a trend in wedding dresses. It's definitely something that's being seen across kind of women's fashion brands, and it's kind of weird. I mean, particularly in a wedding. But I'm looking at prom dresses because I'm a youth minister, and I see these pictures on my news feed, and the trend is like a lot of crop top prom dresses where you've got a skirt and then kind of like a cropped top, or the very plunging neckline on prom dresses, or all those things. But in a wedding, you just think, man, it seems so risque.
Mm-hmm.
It's so, again, I don't need a window into the wedding night at the wedding ceremony.
You're like, no, thank you.
We don't need, there's just something about that. I mean, and again, these colors, white was hope. The veil is a symbol of the chastity of the bride, right? To go ahead and say, we're literally unveiling her before God and everyone else here in this ceremony it's a bit, ugh.
But here's the deal. I think it's a change in the attitude people have. First of all, we've got to look back. Back in the 60s, people were getting married usually by the age of about 22. Today, people are getting married later and later. It's pushing that 30-year-old mark, and
True.
a lot of people even later. And so part of the conversation is, well, half of these people getting married today are already living together. You know, the quote or the stat is that I'm seeing is 90% of women already have sexual experience when they get married. I didn't actually realize it was that high.
Yeah, it does seem pretty high. Again, okay, so that's where you're coming from. Fine. I don't know. Think it through, right? Do you want, when people see you, when the doors open in the back of the church and you begin to walk forward, you want that, oh, she's so lovely, right? No one wants, oh, check her out. Bummed out, you know, like, come on. Like, but that's what you're setting up. You're setting up for, like, you know, I just don't think you.
Can you do that growl again?
Oh, absolutely.
You had that.
Yeah. I don't think you want the groomsmen going, you check her out. You know what I mean? Like, isn't there some sort of we want the fairy tale? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, like marriage is not a fairy tale, but this moment is not supposed to be a display of the goods, as it were. Right.
But you see, the argument is from NPR. They're talking about how, well, these women are 90% of them, and we're going to play a clip in just a second. 90% of them are already sexually experienced, but then they're also saying they're also experienced with other women. And they're just making it sound like, well, just a passe, no big deal. These women are already experienced. They're interacting. Why make such a big deal?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know.
Well, we'll play a clip coming back into the next segment, but before, we're kind of just talking about this. You know, half of these women are already sexually experienced. They're saying, okay, they're also experienced with other women. They're trying to break down this idea of purity and innocence within marriage.
Can I say that line about, and their experience with other women was just kind of thrown in there out of nowhere in this article? It was just like, and there was no statistic. It was like, oh, and by the way, and no citation, no statistic, no, it's just like, we're trying to make this normal.
Can we just throw back in there, even the statistics that we do see with the whole area of LGBTQ, more men have a tendency to identify as women, be transgender, right? Biological men. More men have a tendency to identify as attracted to other men. It's interesting that it's more men in general that tend to have this sexual, you know, kind of perversion, and we can call it that, right? It's outside of the norm. But women, you know, to suddenly slide in there, well, this is why they're having risque dresses. Gosh, you know?
It seemed tenuous and out of place in the article, for sure.
It seemed out of place. But this is how people are talking, trying to make it sound so no big deal, passe. This is just how life is today. But that's not the norm, you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have to read and look with our critical thinking hats on, right? And go, why did they throw that in there? What are they trying to do? Hey, we're going to talk a little bit more about this after the break. You're listening to Trending, and we'll be right back. That was 4 minutes.
We still have
4 seconds.
Yeah, and we still have the segment to play in. Yes. That's okay. I was trying to draw it out. Would it be weird to come back to it?
Dum, 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 dum. Dum, 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 dum. Bum, 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 bum,
you know
bum,
what we
bum,
do?
bum, bum,
We do need another 5 seconds.
Yeah, 4 or 5 seconds.
Because I left the space for the bumper too, so you could insert it in there.
So yeah, if you want to set it up, here's the clip, or did you already set it up?
We said we're going to be playing a clip, and then I had a really awkward yeah, absolutely, and so.
But we don't specifically talk about the whole virgin horror dichotomy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like, wait, when you came, I'm like, yes. It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry, Facebook Live. We had a clip that we were thinking about showing in that first segment, and now we're trying to figure out how to work it in.
We've got to fill like 10 seconds for that first segment.
Which is the benefit of not doing the show live, except with you, and then except you're like, what are they talking about? Yeah.
You know, it's fine without the clip. We'll just bring it in now. And I think we'll just need like an extra 5 seconds somewhere in there. Could you?
That you don't need to worry about.
Okay.
I could
extend music out. Perfect. Okay. So we'll just bring it in with a clip and then transition topics real quick. Are you changing into the hat for this next show?
Game time. I feel like I just needed to kick it up a notch, so I brought in the radio hat.
Okay. Coming in the next segment, and we'll use, if you want to just play the clip right after.
So music that clip.
Or I can introduce the clip. Would that be better? Yep. Okay.
You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
I mentioned before the break, there's this clip from NPR where they're talking about the plunging necklines for wedding dresses. But I just want to play this. We'll go ahead and set it up right here.
Maybe what we're seeing with these wedding dresses with super low cleavage, says Aaron, are dresses that dismantle the tired old virgin whore dichotomy. They prove the girl that a guy wants to sleep with and the girl he wants to marry are exactly the same person. Netta Ulaby, NPR News.
Wow. The only thing I could think of as I was listening to that was, ew. Virgin whore dichotomy. Yeah.
But what's funny is that a lot of the time, a lot of men do care with any sense of slight bit of morality. At the end of the day, many men do care that that woman is still a virgin.
Well, and I just think it's a false premise to say there's a difference between the woman a man wants to be with and the woman that a man wants to sleep with. It's such a weird, I don't accept the premise. I don't accept that there's a difference. I've never, and again, I'm just one man, but I never thought like, well, this is fun for now, but not blah, blah, blah. You know, like I absolutely, when in romantic relationships, in dating, was always thinking like, is this a person I want to marry? Right. And if it wasn't a person I would consider marrying, then it wouldn't be a person I pursued a relationship with. And when I say relationship, I'm not admitting the whole hooking up thing, because that wasn't part of the reality.
That's not part of our vocabulary, not part of our lifestyle. When you talk about dating, that's not who we are. And so hearing that's like, whoa, that's a really big ideology change, essentially, right? From where we live our lives. And I hope that anyone listening has that same mindset, right? And
yeah.
If you don't, maybe you need to rethink marriage first, right? This idea of marriage, this idea of commitment, this idea of whether or not I want to raise a family with you, right? Whether or not I want to live with you day in and day out. Those questions should come before the potential of a child.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just such a weird trend. I don't want to beat it to death, but I just think, I just don't think many women, when they conceptualize their wedding day, want to have the groomsmen leering at them, want to have the priest going, "Wow," in my church, or have grandma see their from their neckline to their navel. I mean, I just think I think we have to look a little bit past. Unfortunately, the greatest good in how you look today is like, is it sexy, right? And I think we need to move away from that and say, is it becoming? Is it lovely? Is it, how am I being received?
Well, I think we need to kind of put some more context into this. The reason people don't distinguish between who they want to sleep with and who they want to marry is because when contraception came onto the landscape, it made it possible for you to sleep with people that you weren't married to. And then abortion was the fail-safe. Naturally, we had to have abortion is available, because if who you're sleeping with also isn't who you're marrying, well, what if an accident doesn't happen and that contraception isn't 100% accurate?
Yeah, the lie of the consequence-free relation, or the consequence-free sex, like that's the lie of our modern time, right? That we've made sex just an act. There's nothing more to it than just an act between two consenting adults, except it isn't, and it has never been. And these contraceptive methods aren't 100%, and abortion does kill a real living human being, and venereal disease does happen at great frequency and has only gone up since the contracepting society. And now we're carrying it over to say, well, because sex is just a thing, then marriage just becomes this moment of, I don't even know what it is as it's conceived in this. It's a mess. It's a mess.
I'm going to bring a topic up in conversation here, and that is, I was looking at a piece from Ireland talking about how Ireland is essentially 30 years behind us in terms of the sexual revolution. I think, looking at these two side by side, the reason that quote from NPR made sense is because of the contraceptive mindset, right? Because of what we can get away with today. Well, it's interesting. A piece came out as Ireland is looking this coming Friday. Please pray. It is the 25th of May when Ireland will vote, God willing, to uphold the 8th Amendment that will continue to protect human life and not allow abortion. Please, again, spend time in prayer, adoration. You guys, we've got to keep fighting and supporting as prayer warriors here in the States or other countries that are listening to Trending that aren't in Ireland. In Ireland, anyone out there, know that we are with you. But what I saw, Chris, is that they're essentially 30 years behind. They legalized divorce about 30 years later in the 90s, right? Now they're just starting to revisit, really looking at legalizing abortion as well.
Right. The Irish stance on abortion is completely contrary to the rest of the Western world. And, you would think, and the arguments, I think, on the part of people who are so pro-abortion, pro these things, would say, like, oh, then they must have 15 kids each, or they must have all these illegal abortions, or all this. And the birth rate in Ireland is like 1.92. It's not that every woman's having 10 children or something. But what I think is interesting about Ireland, too, is they've supported this idea of we don't have abortion with then a lot of programs to support mothers and to support children, right? And so it's been a pro-life stance, not only in it's that abortion is murder and they're going to stand against that, but that when you do have people who need support and they're having children, we're going to support those people. We're going to set up programs to be a safety net for women who do have children out of wedlock or whatever the situation may be. I think we as American Catholics and as the American pro-life movement have to take a look at that and say, yeah, we can't just be anti-abortion, we have to be pro-life, and I think we are, but that has to be kind of backed up by saying, well, maybe it's okay to have government programs that support people who find themselves in these situations.
Or being more aware even within our churches that we're helping people and we're aware enough and we're having the conversations that are necessary to support other individuals. You know, Ireland, people would say, oh, well, Ireland's so behind the times, you know, with the sexual revolution, they're just catching on. But the reality is that Ireland is actually 8th in the world. And if you think about all the developing countries, 8th in the world at achieving economic and social equality. So they have a high number of people in management positions. They have a high level of people with higher economic status, social equality, and I think that that's really important to recognize. Even serving and working within the public realm, it's not like they're not up with the times. And this is the argument, Chris. I just find it so offensive, especially as a woman, to think that women have to have legalized abortion in order to be financially illiterate, in order to have any type of position in the workforce that's not within the home only. You know, my life alone, I didn't need contraception. I don't need abortion in order to do the work that I'm doing today. And women don't. And it's such a lie to say that they do.
Yeah, it is absolutely a lie they do. There's this weird mentality, I think, in on that side of the aisle or whatever, the people who are pro-abortion, this whole movement, to say that, well, women should have the freedom that men have so they can have casual, free sex or whatever it is. And I would just say that's so foreign and backwards. I think what we should be saying is that men should have to deal with the repercussions of living that lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like if a man fathers a child, rather than saying, well, the woman should be able to abort it, no, you should say, well, no, that man needs to step in now and have a role in that child's life, in the support of that child, and the welfare of that child, and raising that child. And when we look at that in that respect, then I think that's where you really truly see we're supporting people rather than supporting lifestyle or something.
But instead, we're compromising women's health for the sake of this entire argument. So we're pushing abortion, which we know is not good for the health of a woman.
No, it's not. And again, the argument always comes, well, in countries that don't have legalized abortion, you have a higher maternal mortality rate, which is not true in the case of Ireland, right?
Ireland has the lowest maternal mortality rate in the entire world, and they do not have legalized abortion. I wish people would just get that for a moment. They have women in the workforce. They have high economic social status. They're not dying all the time. Women are happy, and they're involved in society. And guess what? A lot of the people in Ireland do not want abortion legalized.
Right. That has to be spoken to, that this is being pushed on the Irish people from outside. And let's just take a stop and say that this Eighth Amendment to the Irish Constitution that said that we stand for life, right? We support the right to life. That was just the 1980s. This is not something that was put on the Irish, and centuries ago, and they didn't want it, and it's just a holdover. It was like 1980s that the Irish, in response to what was happening in the rest of the world, said, hell, no, not in our country. No, we're not going to do that here in Ireland. And so it hasn't been this long, drawn-out thing. This is very much the rest of the world pushing on the Irish people. And so we really, Timmerie said it, I'm going to emphasize it, we really, as people listening here, as people concerned, we need to be praying for the Irish people on this vote, May 25th.
As the conversation continues today, it's important to remember that abortion is not health care. Healthcare is something that helps treat, right, a disease. And for some reason, we've taken our mindset to treat pregnancy as a disease, right, to be rigorously fought off. This is why we are all of a sudden funding contraception here in the United States, why we fund abortion in many cases. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the praise report coming up with the Title 10 funding. But essentially, we've treated pregnancy as if the woman's body, essentially working through a natural function, is deficient and in need of fixing. But I'm sorry, my body isn't deficient and in need of fixing because I have the potential to get pregnant.
Right. And that's language we use it with men too, right? You know, did he get fixed? Right. You talk about, you know, in having a man with a vasectomy. We've definitely gotten to a weird point where we've forgotten that the marital act results in children. Like, that's a natural part of being a human being, right? If you have sex, it makes babies. I don't want to ruin anybody's day, but that's what happens. And it's not something, again, we say that, but like, and babies are a good thing. Right. And I can speak to this. We have 6 kids. Number 6 was kind of a surprise. And he's only, you know, like 5 months old. There's not a day where I've ever looked at him and said, oh, I wish you'd never been born. You know, I every morning I wake up and I see him and it brings joy to my life.
You know, working in the crisis pregnancy center, it would be very common. The counselors would sit down with a girl waiting the results of a pregnancy test. And the pregnancy test is they're waiting. And the conversation would go along the lines of, well, what if you're not pregnant? You know, and kind of having that conversation about changing lifestyle. Well, the pregnancy test comes up and she's pregnant. Some of the response would be, that is not possible. These girls don't believe that they will get pregnant because they're on not just one, but sometimes 2 and 3 forms of hormonal contraception, often not taking any of them correctly. But there's this mindset that we've separated sex from babies, right? And baby making from sex and sex from marriage. All of this has been broken up to the point where people are shocked when a baby comes along. We'll be right back on Trending, talking more about Title 10 funding and the great news.
We got to turn off that alarm.
Look, I said it is off.
Is it on Do Not Disturb?
Yeah, it's on Do Not Disturb as well.
There.
Should that do it?
Maybe.
Test it. Let's test it.
We're trying a new alarm system for our segments here in the studio. And it keeps going boom, 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 which sounds like someone just got off the elevator in the hallway, actually. So we're testing out to see if that'll work. Now I put on the Do Not Disturb. Nope.
Even louder?
Still super loud.
Okay, I'll just go back to stopwatch.
Stopwatch.
This is why.
You don't stopwatch. You share. Okay, Facebook, YouTube. Don't stop watching.
That is true.
Oh, man.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and head into that second segment. Checking out Facebook here. Good stuff. Love hearing what you guys are up to. And just remember, when we're silent for a second, it is because we have the bumpers that you guys can't hear, but they're flooding in through here.
Right.
Hopefully you enjoy our new bumper music. I like it. I had someone who commented, I love Trending. I cannot stand the new music. That's okay. We love you.
Why did they hurt me?
I know.
I like the music. I'm
know.
have fun with it.
I love.
Tell them to sit down.
Just sit down. I can't stand.
Thank you, producer Jim.
But Okay, we're gonna go ahead and come back in. I hopped over.
Yeah, you did.
Topics. Like I'm pulling it up. So
yeah, we hopped into segment 3. So we're depression and
Yep.
abortion tied to women's mental health.
Bring us in.
You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie.
You know, so often we forget that Christ said, literally said, in this life you will have trouble. I mean, and I think sometimes as Christians we're unprepared for trial when it comes. But that's just part of our experience. That trial is part of the human experience, and that being a Christian doesn't take trial out of your life. In fact, Hebrews says, bear your trials as if they're discipline, right? But it catches us by surprise.
You know, in a day where mental health is such an issue, I think sometimes we're quick to say, well, in 2 spectrums. One, either God has abandoned me because I'm going through a difficult time and I may or may not be struggling in my prayer life, or we deal with it completely separately as I'm just in this major funk and God has nothing to do with it. And, you know, the story that came out from CNN, this one woman, Lakeisha Fleming, talks about how she loves our Lord. She was in a period where her production company was growing. She's worked a lot in Hollywood, CNN, and a number of other awesome places. Really fantastic resume. She homeschools her children. This sounds like a super mom from what I'm listening to. I'm just going to throw that out there. And this Christian woman ends up finding out at 40 that she's expecting a baby. And they are thrilled. And as they go in for one of the ultrasounds, I think at about 12 weeks, they end up noticing, things are kind of being delayed. The whole family's there waiting to see the pictures, and they're bringing multiple doctors in. And as she finds out that the baby seems to have stopped developing around 7 or 8 weeks, she just starts screaming, no, no.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that we've never had to face anything like this in our relationship, our marriage, and our children. I just can't imagine. When we were years ago, when we were kind of expecting our second child, I had a friend who they'd had a baby girl, and I was on my way to a conference or something, and I got a phone call, and the baby had died in the night, SIDS, and it was such a hard thing to face and to walk through, and all of those questions of God, where are you in this? And how could you let this happen? And I think that comes. And the hardest thing as a person of faith is sometimes feeling like we're not allowed to be angry at God, right? Like we're not allowed, or that we're not allowed to feel bad, or that somehow because this happened, I'm to blame because my faith wasn't strong enough, or some such nonsense like that. And it can be, that, and again, loss of a child is, I think, the worst thing I can imagine. But there are a lot of things that can come into our life where you go, what was that? How'd that happen? Why is this happening to me?
Things didn't go according to plan, the time frame that I set up for my life. I know so many people today are living their single years for a longer period of time. They've not met that spouse that they'd like to. They're not able to get married. They're not able to have children because they don't have that spouse. Whether it's a miscarriage or whatever, they come in different forms. Or maybe you've lost your job, right? And whatever the context might be, and you have a family to provide for, or you're having to move back home, whatever it is. These periods of time happen, and they can throw us into funks, and we can be angry at God. And some people like to shut that door. But I think at the same time, part of what comes up in this conversation is Letitia talks about how she had to seek help. She ended up taking supplements. She ended up doing things to help with her depression. She couldn't just, and I don't want to say just, but prayer wasn't enough in some senses for her. And part of that is recognizing prayer is always enough for us, but we're body and soul, and we've got to exercise, just like we talk about exercising and eating right. Sometimes we need to give the proper treatment to the brain as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. In reading this article, she mentioned that prayer wasn't enough. As I was listening to it in the car, because I was listening to it, but it just struck me like, well, how beautiful is it that God gave us a church then, right? So there are times when we feel alone and we feel distant from God, and our prayer seems dry. And if you're walking by yourself, that can be a very isolating, very lonely, disruptive, hard time. But if you're walking with community, then you have brothers and sisters, and you can say, I'm struggling right now. And again, Galatians tells us that we need to carry each other's burdens, right? You can't do that unless you're talking to people, unless you're in relationship with people. And particularly when you're going through a time of depression, to be able to reach out to friends or family or community and say, I'm struggling right now. I need your help. I need you to be part of this and walk with me. And then on the other part, on the side of friends and family, to not pull away because we don't know, or because we're uncomfortable. And we, I know it's, me as a man, I want to fix things, right? Sometimes I can't. Sometimes I just have to be present, and I think that's very hard.
I was just back in my old hometown and went to Mass there, and we're celebrating the feast of Pentecost and the coming of the Holy Spirit, and we're reminded of the gifts that each of us have to make up that body of Christ. And one of the things he was talking about is how he really saw that lived out in the community where I grew up in Lake Arrowhead. And he said, when he first moved into town, there was a huge funeral for one of the main individuals in the parish. And what happens is he comes into the hall after, or just getting ready for the funeral, and there's this massive feast that has been catered. And he's walking around going, who on earth catered this? And he's in awe at all of the food and things. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that was the community. And sure enough, he goes, I was just shocked when I realized someone came up and said, oh yeah, so-and-so brought this, so-and-so brought that. That was my life growing up within our church. If someone died or someone was really sick, or maybe there was a major baptism or a celebration of a priestly ordination, they didn't cater it. Everyone brought food to contribute to that celebration of life or as a gift in the midst of a mourning and an act of love. And people came together for that. And I think that just like when dealing with our own suffering in our journey, that importance of have we developed that community within our parish?
Right. Absolutely. I've dealt with periods of depression, and I think we want to say that it has to be some kind of event, like something has to happen. Something has to knock your. Sometimes depression is just something that happens, and there's no real reason for it. If you're dealing with depressive periods, and I've said to my friends, if I disappear, I need you to come find me. Like, I need you to know that if you just stop hearing from me for weeks at a time, then call me. Just ask me how I'm doing. I'm probably fine, but just call me. And you just can't have that unless you've taken the time to get to know people. I think one of the deadliest things that's happened in the life of the church is I'm going to call it the McDonaldization of our parishes, where we get in this mindset of, well, we can't make it to Mass here, so we're going to go to Mass over here, or we do this, or we do that. And it's just like, well, you can get a hamburger anywhere you go. It's the same hamburger no matter where you go. And there's something beautiful in the church that, yes, it's the same Mass. Jesus is present at any Catholic church in the world. But if you don't have a community, then you're missing something integral to the experience of our faith, to the life of the church, that you're missing that connection to the body of Christ. And so I'm going to say, like, your church, I'm going to say, if you want a healthy relationship with the church and a community that's going to support you in times of trial, then your butt should probably be in the same place every Sunday at about the same time. And you should go out of your way to make sure you know the story of the people sitting around you and they know yours. And that's uncomfortable.
I think that we live in such a time of convenience. It's ironic that you talk about it as McDonald's. It's quick, it's drive-through, in and out, no wasting time. But to have that connectivity, and even this starts with our families, right? Having that contact with our families and that family life. We remember that within the church is also our family, right? So just like we have our family members, our brothers, our sisters, our parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone should have that connectivity. And I know that this has changed as people live further away from each other, but there's still that dialogue that's taking place, right? And that dialogue, that model is also what's meant to be lived in the church. It was lived in the early church, right?
Absolutely. Well, and the early church knew this. They couldn't medicate with sports and TV and stuff. The early church was in a period of persecution where you could not buy groceries at the market unless you offered incense to the god of the market. So how would you get food? Well, you depended on the community of believers. You needed to know each other's stories, right? We are now so convenient that we've got so many things going on in our lives that we just can't be bothered. And so we've relegated our experience of faith to just show up on Sunday once a week, if you show up on Sunday once a week. But then you could be sitting next to somebody who's struggling, who just lost their child, who doesn't know how they're going to keep doing it, homeschooling their kids, can't get them to school because they just can't get out of bed in the morning, and you don't know the story because you're just checking off your box. Right? And so you are the hands and feet of God, and you're not holding what he's asking you to hold.
And again, it comes down to a lot of the time of listening, just being aware, right? And praying for that person, not necessarily just interceding and hopping right in. And it's not coming in, oh, I heard this is going on to you, but just like, how are you doing? That checking in type of moment is so fundamental, and we live in a time as well. We've been talking about abortion and, from plunging necklines, this attitude of no difference between who you want to marry and who you want to have sex with, right? Like this whole conversation. Chris, you sent over this article talking about how abortion has become increasingly more impactful on women's health. And this is a study we've seen coming out over and over again over the years. Yet all of a sudden, sometimes you'll see CBS or somewhere pick the story up. Well, here's another example. We're pulling up an article from a few years ago from CBS.
Yeah. And again, this is CBS saying that women who have abortions have a higher risk of depression. And that's something that I think the pro-life community has been talking about for years, right? And it's true, though. It's like one of those things. And it's, depression, I think depression, like you said, it's a hot button topic right now. Like I think we're becoming more and more aware of mental illness. And I think in respect, the church is responding to it in a much better way. Here we have something we know that affects women negatively, right? That women who have abortions deal with the ramifications of that for years and years afterwards, right? And I think it's safe to say that those who don't, quote unquote, are the anecdotal evidence, right? Those who do are the rule. Those who don't are the anecdote. And yet we don't have a discussion about it. We pretend like it's not happening. And you're anti-choice or you're anti-woman if you bring it up. No, I'm pro-woman. I don't want women to suffer.
Right. And, there's an increase in anxiety, depression, alcohol, any type of substance abuse, and they're 115 times more likely to commit suicide. These are the people in our pews next to us that we can be reaching out to with love and kindness and generosity, being willing to have those conversations about life and family that they too need to hear, and we need to be willing to reach out. Coming up on the show, you're going to hear much more, especially having to do with Title X funding and the great news. Wonderful. Let's go ahead and slide into that next segment.
Which we had as Ireland. So
this is our fourth segment now.
Is this our fourth
Yep.
segment?
This is our fourth.
Good to know.
Yep, because we had one where we had a different time clock. That's why I like having the lap, because you can see how many.
You can tell which segment you're on. Yeah.
I'm gonna do it so we can. Okay, we're ready to come on in.
Oh, just before we jump to Title 10, let's just touch depression just real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, bring us in.
Cool.
You're listening to Trending with Chris and Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
So we've been talking about depression and the church and the effects of abortion on depression in women, and it's undeniable it's a thing. I just wanted to kind of end that conversation as we move on our next topic just by saying, if you're struggling or think you might be struggling with depression, don't be afraid to reach out to someone. And again, if we talked about community and our parishes and all of that, if you feel like you don't have someone to reach out to, well, then make an appointment to talk to your parish priest, right? Just show up and talk to the receptionist, right? It doesn't really matter, but you need to reach out to get someone so that you're not alone. If you've ever thought of hurting yourself, God forbid, of injuring yourself, then you want to reach out and you want to find some help. Go online, Google depression hotline, and just find a place to get yourself help. You're not alone. You don't have to suffer through it alone. And there is an end to this. This is something you will get to the other side of. Believe me, you will get to the other side of it.
And on that same note, maybe it is from a past abortion. A lot of people within our own communities and our friends, family members, close family members have had an abortion. And so having that resource of rachelshope.org is so important so that you're able to reach out and assist people and directing them in a direction with people who are qualified and ready to help walk through that journey and pain of having had an abortion. On kind of a different note, shifting gears here, you may have heard the awesome news. This past week, Title X funding, basically the laws behind Title X funding have been upheld, and they haven't been fully over for a number of years now. What's happened is we're going to see $60 million less going to Planned Parenthood. Praise God, this is awesome news.
Yeah, and I think it has to be pointed out, Planned Parenthood receives something like $500 million from the United States government every year. $500 million. That is just unbelievable amounts of money. It's unimaginable amounts of money.
And I just want to emphasize that is every single year.
Yeah.
So what's happened is, for those who don't know what Title X funding is, essentially, it's a family planning and low-income resources available to people who need that assistance. Now, a lot of that will have to do with STD testing, cancer screening, birth control, among many other resources for women in particular. But in general, for families, well, a lot of that money, while unfortunately will still be going to hormonal contraception, what some of that funding was doing is it was helping to subsidize abortion. Planned Parenthood's primary business is abortion, right?
No, I thought that was only 3% of what they did.
Oh my God.
I had to do it. I had to throw it in there.
You look at the business model. For those who don't know, they count every interaction. So say you come in, they count the pregnancy test, they count the conversation, the counseling going into it. They count all these different services, trying to make it show that their business is not abortion. Yet at the same time, and this is part of the conversation, for the last year, Ivanka Trump has actually been asking, because this has been coming down the pipeline for a while. She's been asking Cecil Richards, please, will you separate the abortion side of Planned Parenthood from the rest of the work you guys do? And, I'm really glad that she said no, because I think we're going to see this Goliath of Planned Parenthood really going downhill. And I think that's why Cecil Richards jumped ship.
Right. Okay. Again, the 3% argument is one you hear all the time. All the time. Well, 3% of what they do is abortions. If you're a car dealership and you give out 1,000 pens every month and you sell 100 cars, would you say that the pens are your business? Right? Does that make sense? Like it just does it. No, the cars are your business.
Planned Parent's just counting all those condoms that they're passing out, each of those pills. You know, like they're trying to make it look like they're doing something else.
I just don't think you can count your marketing tools as your business, right? Because let's face it, the condoms are to sell abortions because the condoms fail.
Exactly. The condoms, the hormonal contraception, even the sex education that they're involved in, all they try to say, we're here for you. They're also encouraging sexual activity early on. They're encouraging promiscuity. Like, this is a lifestyle they're encouraging because that's the business that they're in. And under Cecil Richards, and we've got to talk about her because she is stepping down this month from Planned Parenthood as president. Well, during her time there, Chris, she's been there since I think 2006. During her time, do you know what she did? She took a business and made it a better business. A business that was in the business of abortion, but doing multiple different types of services. She narrowed in on business to make sure that abortion was a primary thing they did. That's why Abby Johnson, among other people who worked within the abortion clinic, said, we all of a sudden saw this higher quota for the number of abortions we had to pump out in our clinics.
Right, because the abortions are where they get their money.
Exactly.
Apart from your taxes, right? That's where they get them. And so what is it? The revenue is like $1.6 billion in net revenue. And they get $500 million from the federal government. So yeah, she streamlined the business of killing children.
But here's the good news, you guys. Because of this shift, or I shouldn't even say shift, but re-emphasis in Title X funding, that was never supposed to go towards abortion. And finally, people are waking up and saying, basic business, if we're giving you, let's say, $60 million and your primary business is abortion, but this money's quote unquote going to contraception and STD testing, well, do you think it makes it a little more easy to free up funds for the abortion industry? Of course. So what's happened is, because Planned Parenthood has refused to separate the abortion side from the rest of their business, they're losing their funding along with any other health clinic that is receiving Title X funding. They have to be separate entities, separate funding sources, separate staff in order to receive that Title X funding still.
Right. And again, the horror on the part of the pro-abortion advocates, oh, how could they do this? This is unprecedented. This was the way things were up until the Clinton administration. You know, it wasn't until Bill Clinton that all of a sudden these groups could receive this funding. Prior to that, it was not acceptable because I think rightfully so, the federal government said, you know, there's half the country or more than half the country feels like this is killing children, right? And so we can't in good conscience make people who feel like this is killing children pay for the killing of children.
Yeah, we've been doing it for years now. Our tax dollars have been helping subsidize abortion for so long. And sometimes I know people who just are saying, I don't want to pay my taxes anymore because I know in part what I am assisting in. And, you know, we live in a time where for some reason, though, abortion is healthcare. And I talked about this earlier on. Abortion is not healthcare. Just as Ireland is fighting to legalize or to keep abortion illegal, right? Because Irish people are pro-life. This is being pressed upon them. We see that we have to continue to speak up and say abortion is not part of healthcare. It's not something we should be funding, nor is hormonal contraception. I hope to God that is what's next removed from this family planning, basically Title X funding.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to get into politics too much right here, but love or hate our current president, it is hard to argue that he hasn't made great strides for the right to life thus far.
And it's important to remember that our president is not the only person working to make this happen. You, sitting in your car right now, maybe at the office, you are also someone who has worked to make this happen by putting the pressure on our lawmakers and influencers. Gosh, Chris, the last year, we have seen incredible achievements for human life. Not only did we see Mexico City reinstated, but they expanded Mexico City. Do you know what that did? That prevented $9 million from going to fund abortion overseas. Guess what else? We also pulled out of the UN population control, which also prevents us from participating and helping fund things such as China's one-child policy or false two-child policy. You can hear other shows where we talk about that. I mean, we've seen the expansion of Medicaid funding to lower income families, and how now that funding is not going to any place that performs abortion. We've seen an increase in conscience protections. Iowa's heartbeat law, that's Iowa. Like, we have to see it. These are fantastic moments in American history for life.
Right. And I think it's really important to say we can't back off. And so this has to happen through the legislative process. It has to happen through laws. It cannot be dependent upon individual candidates and executive actions. Because when it happens through individual candidates and executive actions, or whether that be on the state level or the federal level, then the next person can come in and change it. When it happens through laws, it is much more difficult to change legislation because you need everyone to agree than it is to change executive actions. And so we need to be really, really working on our congresspeople, on our representatives, on our state governments to say, no, this is what we demand. Like, we're the ones who voted for you. We don't work for you. You work for us to represent us. And if you don't represent us, you won't represent us.
Absolutely. And that voice makes a difference, you guys. We cannot emphasize it enough. We don't just say, oh, this individual made this happen. No, it was you. Your intercession in praying and fasting, your intercession and standing in front of that abortion clinic and saving that one life at a time. We are living, yes, in a country that has legalized abortion. And Ireland may be very soon living in the same type of makeup. But that doesn't mean that we have to be silent.
No, absolutely not. I was in reading the reaction to this story, NPR had an article, Planned Parenthood sues to block Trump's radical shift in family planning programs. And I had to say, I took quite a bit of exception with this article because it starts out talking about the rhythm method.
Oh my gosh, Chris, they say because he's removing this family planning funding from Planned Parenthood, women are going to succumb to just depending on the rhythm method, which hardly any people who practice NFP even use.
Right. It was blatant. It was just the most ignorant article. And they said it multiple times, the rhythm method. And that is not natural family planning in the modern time. And there's multiple methods of natural family planning, and that is not one of them. And it was just so clearly trying to, I think whenever anyone wants to undercut natural family planning, they immediately throw out rhythm method as if that's all it is. And sadly, when you go and talk to doctors, typically that's all they know too. Like, they've never really learned about what natural family planning or fertility awareness is.
It's a scare tactic that they're using to make you think that women will no longer have the access to basic health care. And again, that's not health care that they need in order to be an equal member of society. Women, we've got to speak up. We do not need contraception. We do not need abortion to live in the society today and be successful, whether at home or in the workforce.
Right. And so apparently there's this document from Health and Human Services, pardon me, I forgot that, from Health and Human Services, and it makes mention of family planning services like fertility awareness or natural family planning. And that is like a groundbreaking moment that the federal government and a federal department is saying, hey, we need to make people aware of this. And it just kind of makes good sense that, again, if you're a woman and you're aware of your fertility cycle, then you're aware of your overall health. If you're not aware of it, then you're not. Hey, we're going to talk a lot more about this stuff coming up after the break. We will catch you in just a minute.
That's Chris Mueller. I'm Timmerie Millington. I hope you guys have a great week. We will talk to you guys next week. God bless, and listen to more of Trending.
Hey, Jim, can you cut that out where I just did that whole thing about after the break?
We're making you work overtime on this first show right now.
So YouTube and Facebook, great. We don't have an after the break because that was the last show of that show.
We're going to stick with the fours so that we can see them.
Yeah, totally.
You guys
totally.
have a wonderful break because you will be back listening to Trending in a few minutes. I think